Good evening and welcome to this working session of the Lakeville Area Schools Board of Education. For attendance purposes, I'll go around and have everybody introduce yourself and say your role. Kim Baker, Chair.
David Anderson, Vice Chair.
Brian Thompson, Board of Education.
Harley Anderson, Board of Education.
Terry Lynn, Board of Education.
Judy Kelleher, Board of Education.
Michael Bauman, Interim Superintendent.
All right, thank you very much for doing that. Our meeting tonight is audio recorded, so make sure that you speak loudly and clearly so that the microphones may pick you up. Our first item for discussion tonight is the Board Policy Committee. This item was added to the agenda because we have had trouble scheduling the Policy Committee, and I just want to make sure that we can discuss that right now and see if we need to switch out any board members to make sure that that committee still meets. So right now it's Carly, Judy, and Brian.
Correct. I am not available until the January 1st for
Okay.
Wednesdays.
Is it?
I've got a prior commitment, so I'm not available.
Okay, is there someone that can sit in for Brian until January 1st?
Sure.
You want to do it, Terry?
Fine.
All right. That's all I had for that. Is there any other questions about that?
Can
When's
you
the
make
next-
that time
When's the
work?
next meeting?
We met, we're not meeting tomorrow, we're meeting next week. Wednesdays at 6:30.
Is it like
The
every other
20th,
Wednesday?
it's the 20th is the next
Other
one,
one.
6:30 to 7:30,
Okay.
every other week.
Got it. Only an hour? That's wonderful. I'm glad I volunteered.
All right, perfect. That takes care of that item. The next item that we have on the agenda is the update for policy 205. Policy Committee, does someone want to update the board on what you've done with this policy?
Do you want to, or do you
Well,
want
I
me?
was gonna say you did. So
Okay.
Judy and I met and went over this policy, but you did the actual edits.
Yeah, so we just went through, and like we've been doing with Brian and myself and Bree, we were just going through and comparing our policy to Minnesota School Board Association to see if there's any updates that need to be made. And then if there's anything that we would be recommending to change to better fit our processes or our district needs. And I think all the changes that you see here, I don't believe there were any that we actually changed for ourselves, because the open meeting and closed meeting policy is really dictated by statute from start to finish. So all the changes that you see on here are because they were changes in the MSBA one.
So I have a question just based on some of the changes of this policy. For item 6A, or 6, and then number 8, it says that meetings provided by interactive technology, is that all school board meetings, or is that working sessions? Like, what does that include?
That would be, well, any meeting, whether it's a work session or a regular meeting or whatever, is a meeting.
Right.
So that is, the way I'm reading it, is any meeting.
Okay,
Yeah, see, under the definition?
yep, okay. See
So,
that. All right.
so anytime we're meeting, so that's
Okay.
it.
I've got additional comments on that one, or I can wait. I've got.
No, that's the only
additional-
question I had.
Yeah, okay. So the one that was added to policy 208, 205, all highlighted in red, was meetings by interactive technology.
Yep.
A meeting may be conducted by interactive technology, Zoom, Skype, or other similar electronic means. I think I'd like to remove Zoom, Skype, or other similar electronic means, just because we don't know what kind of technology will be used 3 or 4 years from now in compliance.
Well, it's basically what interactive technology is, so
It
we
is,
don't, yeah, so, yeah, I
I would
think-
like to go, yeah. And
Yep.
so I also want to add, so I was also reviewing the Minnesota School Board Association. I think it was like part of phase 2 training, and they shared some comments around interactive technology and how it's being used. And so I would like to add, I don't know if you want to keep that line there, but I would like to add the following as a subcomponent A. Interactive technology must be provided if a board member is unable to physically join a meeting and has provided a 3-day notice prior to the meeting. B, the board member must provide a location that is accessible and open to the public. C, all members must be able to see and hear each other. And then D, a roll call vote is required for all votes during interactive use. So this is all content directly from the MSBA PowerPoint that they shared for whatever it's called,
That makes sense.
the phase 2. Then it becomes a bit more clear
Yep,
on
I like
exactly
that.
what needs to be done in that respect. Because again, interactive meetings aren't like one of those where someone can be denied.
Right.
Because if a person is unable to physically join, they have the option, and this is one of those that, as a district, we need to be able to provide.
So we have been operating from that perspective.
We have, but it's not in
It's
policy,
just
that's
not
all.
in policy.
But
Right.
I think it actually, it was in a policy.
Yeah, for some reason, I'm not sure, but I know that's been the practice, and I believe it's in a policy, but I don't know if it's this
Yeah,
one or
um,
another
I think
200
it was.
series.
Well,
review
so
these.
let's say it's in another policy, but
Yeah.
we still want it here in this one?
Well, that's what I was just looking to reference, I was just gonna look this up because they've got, teaching, spot
It's
labor.
Okay.
Yeah,
Like in-
but
in-
that,
in-
that's true, I know
in-
exactly
If we're
what.
talking about meetings, I feel like
It
it
makes
should be.
Yeah.
sense to put it there.
Yeah.
So quickly, just, you don't have to read the whole thing, but what were your 4 bullet points or whatever that you said?
Interactive
Provide.
technology
Yep.
must be provided.
Yep.
Board members must provide a location
Yep.
that is accessible. All board members must be able to see and
Yep,
hear each other,
visible.
and then a roll
Yep.
call vote needs to be deployed.
Yep,
Are you done with your questions? Because I have another one.
No, I've got
Can I
more, I'm
just
sure will overlap.
Specify, when it says we must be provided, is that like our tablets? Is that what you mean?
Correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, so then my other question is on number 9, the purchase and sale of property. This came up when we had a land sale deal earlier, actually last year. And I'm wondering, some of the feedback that we received from community members was having like a public comment or a session where they could share on that sale of the land. And I think that in the case that we went through last time, that would have been beneficial because there were things that we were not aware of as a board with that particular piece of land. So I'm wondering if there's something that can be added to that.
So we do have a policy around public hearings. So
Right.
we could do, if we are hearing from that, we can establish a time and a place for a public hearing to discuss that particular piece of property or that
Right.
particular item. So we do have a policy about public hearings.
So could we add it on here as part of the steps for selling a piece of property that the district owns?
Yeah, I think what.
You can, but we have, I mean, the policy that we have already allows us to do that for anything, not just the sale of property.
It allows us to do it, but it's not saying that we will do it. And I think that's what I'm asking.
I think we should do it.
So let me understand, for any property that is being purchased or sold, you want to have a designated slot for public comment in some capacity.
Correct.
Is that for right before a decision is made, or is that something for before the property is being discussed?
Well, I mean, if you look at like when the city is doing things like that, like it's published in the paper and people know. And for this particular thing that we had for that, it wasn't part of it. So if it's the law, like we need to be doing that.
It's not the law. This here.
But that's what I'm asking is
Yeah.
if, that we
For-
would
for-
do that.
For
like
a
we
purchase
will
or a
do
sale of that magnitude or
Right.
whatever it may be. So in letter D, it does state that the actual purchase or sale must be approved at an open meeting, and the purchase price or sales price is public data. So I'm assuming because it's at an open meeting, we do have public comment, and people can and provide commentary around
But I
that.
get that, but I'm saying like, this is a specific public comment for the sale or purchase of
It's
a
a public
land.
hearing that she wants to have.
Yeah.
But I would recommend not putting it in this policy saying that we have to, because, first of all, I think the attorney would probably say, probably no, because it could open us up to liability if that did not happen, because if you go to Minnesota statutes to do this,
Right.
then this is what you're gonna see here. But the public hearing one is anytime we have issues that we want, like, we'll do it before, we'll do a public hearing before we have a levy referendum, or we'll do a public hearing before we sell property, we'll do a public hearing before,
We didn't have one before we sold property.
we didn't in this one, but we could have.
Well,
I mean,
We should have.
and so, but,
Well, you're an attorney,
Yeah,
like,
we should have had one.
what's your
Well,
thought on
I said
this
my piece on
legally?
it. I said my piece on it. I think it should be in there.
Well, as a local governing body, we can put whatever we want in these
Can we get it
policies.
checked through legal? Like, can
Well,
we
we
have
have-
that checked?
yeah, I mean,
That
this
would be the
will
next
go
step.
through.
And MSBA would be.
Yeah.
I think the benefit of that is when we sell land and we consult relevant policy, and it is stated, I can appreciate, and I would want to hear from legal, whether
Right.
that does create some problems. Because I
Right.
think if we, to your point, Brian, about there being availability during public comment, I would certainly want time to consider stakeholder feedback before we're put to vote on it. So
Yeah,
a separate
absolutely.
meeting would be good, as
Right.
opposed to like right before us making.
Right.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
so when you say, so is a public hearing a separate meeting? Is that what
Yes.
it is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
It's in itself
Okay.
Yes.
a
But
meeting.
purchasing gets like more complicated, I feel like, in
Yeah.
some ways.
Oh, buying land? That's a
Yes,
totally different
because
process.
then
Yeah.
if we open it up that way, it advertises where we're going, you know what I mean? Like, there's a reason why we're able to have private
We-
meetings about some of that, like sale seems more relevant to public where, I mean, people would have an opinion about us buying land potentially, and they should have.
Well, that comes out in the levy referendum because you have to ask for money for it.
Yes.
And so that's approved through a levy, and we've usually done it. I would recommend if this is put in, it's just for the sale of, because we can sell without,
But I could see value in purchasing too, and I get what you're saying, where would that drive prices up, but then if it does, then it's a lost deal, then whoever's trying to sell it to us, then guess what, then we're not gonna buy it if they're gonna do that, and so, then we, I
But
hate to go
here's-
back to the drawing board, but it's public information, like, we're
But-
gonna buy the land, or
well,
want to buy a land.
no, purchasing is
Purchasing,
not
right.
that, is not that simple. We were able, I mean, because we're not just purchasing an acre or two, we're purchasing 30, 40, 80, 90 acres. And in this community, there's not that many available. We can't risk it. And you will see, like, have you had experience with looking at what, if we're able to, like, when we purchased South, we hired
Well,
a.
we did land acquisition for
For-
Highview.
I know,
Highview,
I
yeah.
know, and you do have to do it undercover because of jeopardizing, if they know a government entity's buying it, it can be very costly. And,
But a public hearing could also be beneficial for those who live around that area that's being purchased. Don't they have a voice to say, do I want a school building here or not? How's that
They
gonna
do.
impact my?
They do.
And I'm sure they do, but should they have a forum to share their point of view? If we're gonna have a forum to have people who are selling, if we're selling property and it impacts them, how is it any different from, constituents who get impacted for land that we purchase? I mean, if you're gonna do one, like, I don't know.
well,
I
they're,
don't, so.
well, I'm just saying, it's not very easy to buy 80 or 90 acres of
I agree.
acres of land within our school district.
I know
And
that
so if we
with-
jeopardize a purchase, we jeopardize a building.
Yeah, I mean, I can see both sides, because I know
It's legal.
when this,
Yeah.
yeah, when
Yeah,
the
I think-
city
You have to ask
was,
legal.
when the city was, looking at, in terms of antlers, there was a lot of feedback about that, right? So, there's a lot of public feedback, so it does help to have it, but, yeah, maybe legal would help.
Okay. Kim, you have any more?
No.
I added that in here.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, do you have any more?
No.
Anything
Karen,
else?
do you have any? Do you have any questions?
No, I just said, was there anything else in that area?
No, okay, good. I've got a few more. All right.
I opened the
so,
door for you.
Section 4, procedures. After regular meetings, special meetings, I like to add a letter F, which is not there because, so letter F, I'd like to add.
Wait, I'm sorry, where?
Oh,
Page
under,
two.
under page 2, under procedures, meetings, regular meetings, and special meetings, we've got some A, B, C, D, and I'd like to add an F. And the F would be all regular meetings and special meetings will be video and audio recorded.
have
Oh,
to
up
just
here.
depending where you're at.
Oh, up.
Page 2.
Page 2, but above emergency meetings.
Yes.
Correct.
Oh,
Okay, got
I'm
it.
sorry, there is no letter F, so this would be
Fine.
Yeah.
in addition.
Okay,
And my
I would
addition
like
would
that.
be all regular meetings and special meetings will be video and audio recorded.
Regular meetings.
well,
and
that doesn't
special
have to be in
meetings.
policy. That's something that each board determines
I
during
just
the.
say that all meetings should be video and audio recorded.
Well,
But
but if
that-
it's not in policy, then the next board can choose not to, so in the
They
spirit of.
can, but they can also choose to change the policy.
Agreed, but if it would be policy, well then, yes, they would have to then go and change it in the policy, but I don't want, I mean, if, there's nothing wrong with having videos recorded and, for video and audio, for regular and special meetings. And then for emergency meetings, number 3, I would like to add G, which would then be, all emergency meetings will also be video and audio recorded.
If you just say all meetings, then that
I'm-
covers it.
I'm fine with that.
Well, it's
I-
not both though. We don't video record these.
Oh, or closed sessions. But
I would,
they-
if we just say all meetings, it encompasses all of our meetings,
But then what-
Closed, you don't,
except for closed,
Yeah.
obviously.
It says video and, we don't do both.
No, we haven't been doing both.
Yeah.
I think, like, from an accessibility standpoint, I always worry about the meetings that are just audio recorded. I think it makes it hard for the public. I also would love to be able to have closed captioning on all those meetings too, to be honest, but you can just like take the link and put it in YouTube and it'll do the closed captioning for you. Just a trick someone taught me. But yeah, I agree. I feel like meetings should be recorded, but.
Well, that's fine. I think that's a good discussion with the new board to establish that and get their decision on it and
So,
see.
so the policy is presented now, so the question is, are you against it? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm against putting it in policy. I'm not against that. I'm against adding it to policy because that doesn't guarantee. Adding it to policy, then if like we have leadership development where we're just gonna come and we're gonna do a team building event, then are we gonna need to audio record that?
There, there?
Are you?
I was going to give a point of clarification. For work sessions, they are video recorded, just not streamed. But part of our archival property or policy is for security reasons, they are video recorded. It's just not publicly released.
Oh,
Well, that's very nice to know. Thank you very much for letting us know that.
So-
Announce that because I don't think they.
Just for clarification, for those that are listening online, we did have someone from our tech department step in and say that all of the meetings are video recorded for privacy reasons or security reasons, I think is what he said, and that they just don't provide that video because it's not within policy.
It's
So-
not within the practice.
Right.
So so with this addition of all regular meetings and special meetings, keep in mind, I think what you're referencing would be not regular meetings, those are staff development meetings, and I think those
No,
would not
not
be
staff
recorded.
development.
Not staff,
We do-
but board
if we're
development
doing
meetings,
board
those would
develop-
not be recorded.
Yeah, but see, that's where we're starting to now get into this, not, so.
Well, it's very specific on what a regular meeting is here. It's scheduled or the regular meeting of the board shall be kept on file for things that are like regular meetings that are consistent. So we're not doing ad hoc meetings.
I think for some of the board development meetings, like depending on who we brought in, that there would be proprietary,
Agreed.
like, trademark things
But that
that we
wouldn't
would be-
qualify as a
yeah.
regular meeting.
right? Yeah.
Is a work session a
there-
regular meeting?
Yes,
Yes.
technically it is, as long as
But
there's a
then-
quorum of the board.
For a long time, we were doing every other week, or not every other week, but once a month we were doing board development. So that was a regular, like, part of one of our work sessions.
Right.
Which we probably will do with the oncoming board members, is have 1 week out of the month potentially that's board development focused. So that does become like a regular meeting.
So then we can say all regular meetings and special meetings will be video and audio recorded except for board development.
Closed sessions.
And I'm recommending that you say that and establish that with your new board so that they understand what it is and how you're gonna operate, and it does not need to be documented in policy.
So I would like it documented in policy since we're working on policy 205 right now.
So just a question, like, we don't have it in policy right now, but we have all agreed to that. So is the concern that a future board might not want things like you want it in policy so that it's not a board by board decision?
So if we're gonna have a future.
Well, it can't
Well, they
be.
can
It will
change.
still
They can
be a
change
board
it.
by board
I
decision.
guess my concern is that if we're working on policy 205 now, then let's make that decision now. But if you're gonna say that the future board should come back and look at 205, then why are we even looking at 205 right now?
Well, I mean, I think
Well,
that
they
by
should
the
be
Why are we
time,
even looking at it?
They
by
should
the
be
time it
looking-
goes through
in 2
legal,
months.
it'll be the
Well,
new board.
every board, every year should be reviewing the 200 policies. Every board, every year needs to know what all these policies are. That, because we didn't get, with the onboarding, I know we didn't get through these policies, but you should know what these policies are and how to operate every single year. This needs to be reviewed in January with new board members and existing, just to refresh.
Do you want meetings recorded or not?
Well, what happens if like something happens and it doesn't get
Well, I
recorded?
think last time we talked
And
about this, you and
that's-
I didn't want work sessions recorded, but I guess.
I think we
I guess
felt that way.
I'm okay with it, you know.
We felt that way because we felt that you're much more relaxed and
Right,
open
we didn't want it.
without a camera on in a work
Right.
session. And I think that was the reason why a lot of people didn't want to do it.
So I guess I'm saying, if we put this in policy and something happens where something gets messed up, then it's like, there's some, I can see the point of this is a practice we determine as opposed to,
But there's always the option, the opportunity that something could be messed up. You know what I mean? Like, that's always going to be something that can happen. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that we shouldn't write it down, but I
It's
just
up to you
say
guys.
like,
I was just throwing it out.
I agree with what you're saying, and if we're gonna have legal check, some of these other things, I don't know why we can't add that in and have them check that too.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
What else you got, Brian?
Huh? All right, next one. If a person receives an actual notice of a meeting, I'm sorry, I think it's the page, it's the next page, page 3.
Okay?
If a person receives an actual notice of a meeting of the Board of Education at least 24 hours before the meeting, all notice requirements are satisfied with respect to that person, regardless of the method of the receipt of notice. So I just want to make clarification. Like if an email does that count? Just want to make sure that we understand that definition.
Okay.
Good.
Yep, thanks.
Okay. All right. And then a clarifying one that I had was closed meetings, letter E. Section B, the time and place of the closed meeting shall be announced at the public meeting. And so I just need a clarification on this one because I don't recall how we do this. If we wanted to have a closed meeting, am I reading this as in we have to announce it that we're having a closed meeting during an open meeting before we can have
we
the
do
closed
that.
meeting?
We do that.
That's
So
what we
like,
bring to the table.
Got
when
it.
we have the open meeting and then,
We come in
we
here
have to
with it,
vote to move into closed
And
session.
then we go in there.
Got
Yes,
it.
and then we come back out and close.
Okay.
And open and then.
Yeah, we
And
just.
then we
say-
have to come back in
Adjourn.
here.
But you have to name the time and the place. We just have to let them know that
Right.
we're moving into closed session, and then we're going to be meeting in the
Yep.
spruce room.
Right.
I forgot to add one for going up to written materials, letter C. We are talking about any open meeting, a copy of any printed materials, including electronic communications, will be shared and distributed or available to all board members, blah, blah, blah. I do want to add a third one that says, any artifact shared or presented to the board shall be electronically available for public reference and added to, I don't know if you want to add it to the board book website. The couple examples that I want to use, that there's been past meetings where in a working session, we see PowerPoint presentations, but community members have no idea what's on it. And then we've got, the survey guy comes and he shares a survey and people are asking, well, what are the results? They don't see it. And so during a regular board meeting, we provide all these artifacts in the agenda, but we don't during working sessions. So I know that there were some stories around, or there's pros and cons of sharing the material ahead of time before a
Like,
meeting.
because it's a draft. like
Because
you have
it's a
to say.
draft,
Yeah.
but if it is something that the board is reviewing during a working session, wouldn't we want to just share that to whoever wants to follow along, that this is a draft and this is what we saw? I mean, I feel like hiding that or not sharing that seems not appropriate.
Oh, you have
I
to-
see,
Not
I see
hiding
two
it.
areas there. One I see is when they present something to us, like that survey that was done. I have no problems with that. That should go on for public consumption. If they're coming to us with a draft of something they're going to present, which they will present at a regular meeting,
Yep.
I don't think that should go on the website until they make their corrections and present it to us at the regular meeting, because it's not true, because they're going to be changing it.
Yep, and I agree with you that I understand your point of view, but if you're a constituent and you want to follow along, for those who are super like, hey, school board's my jam, they want to follow along.
Really?
But they don't get to see the materials along the way. And so maybe they would have different interpretations, or maybe they would see something different. They may have a feedback, but if they don't get to see that until the end, when here's the final draft. And so if they want to be involved in the process, I guess, I mean, if we see a draft that's
Well, wait a
presented
second.
to us,
They are, though.
they get to see it, but those who are choosing not to be here can't see it, and I guess I don't understand what the difference then is.
If we're going to televise everything, they'll see it.
Well, so I
Right?
guess one question that I would have.
Yeah, but
just-
it'll be hard to review that.
What?
It'll be hard to review that.
It just becomes more transparent, that's all.
In the situation of a work session, so this is a question for you, Mr. Baumann. How far in advance do they have those presentations ready in terms of
Well,
like the agenda going? So
Yeah,
if we
candidly,
asked-
my experience with that is we're getting feedback up to an hour, half hour before, and we're making refinements, I don't call them corrections,
Oh, I'm sorry.
to presentations. And because I've done it both ways. I think in the environment we're in, transparency is super important. The challenge you're gonna run into is when you have social media.
Yep.
And people will put things on social media, this is what I saw, and they'll change the context, and then you run into that challenge, which is fine as long as the board understands that's the terrain we're operating on. And that is more transparent, no pushback on that at all. You just have to be prepared for dealing with that gap of time between whatever's communicated here, what would be communicated with those documents versus where we're at in the process.
Well, so
Which
can
is,
they be-
it's not
Well-
a big deal, because in my opinion, the more you're sharing with the public, because we are a public education system, probably the better.
And that, we have done that in the past. We
Yep.
did have it where we had the posted, people could follow along and see the materials, but it was causing a lot of confusion and misinformation, because that they assumed that was what was going forward to the board meeting, and then they didn't watch the board meeting to see what the final product was, and we had confusion. So that's why we ended up backing out of doing that, knowing that the final materials that were presented at the work session would be available at the board meeting.
So again, I am not opposed to, I mean, I'm okay with the materials not being shared on the agenda, but I would be in favor of making sure that those artifacts are available shortly after the meeting ends, so that people can reference if they want to. And now, in my particular profession, we use the
Well,
word draft on all these
Yeah.
PowerPoints.
After the meeting or during the
So,
meeting?
or like preliminary,
You just
or
put drafts of
like all
things
over,
in
yeah.
there.
But, so.
Yeah, after the meeting or during the meeting?
Well, I would say after the meeting, just because, like you said, if you guys have things that aren't ready to go right away, but as soon as the minutes are available, or the video's uploaded, or whatever it may be, then the artifacts ought to be supporting
Oh,
that.
so if they
So
go
that
back
people
to
could go
listen
back
to it,
and-
they
Yes.
have something
That makes
to,
sense.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, we've done that.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think that sounds good.
Is that one? All right. And, all right, so, number 2, I'm sorry.
Oh, but wait a
sessions-
second,
Yes.
we were just talking, but are we, I don't think, I mean, again, I don't think that needs to be written into the policy, because I think.
I think it does, because that it mandates that we are going to be transparent with our meetings.
Well, we have to be transparent with our meetings,
Well,
law
by
mandates
not putting in the
that.
policy means that future boards can choose not to.
They can choose not to by talking about it in January when they cover this policy to remove that.
Well, then let's just review the policy in January then.
Well, you should be reviewing it in January. What this is bringing this up to law, or up to what Minnesota School Board is, because they've made some changes, like we said, electronic communications.
Yes.
And stuff, but there's a difference between what's in policy and what your practices are. And the practices, everybody needs to understand and know what's in policy, so they act according to the law. The practices are talked about every January and early, and even more often if needed, on what you're all going to agree to make sure you're all operating within the same parameters. So there's a difference between policy and practice.
I'll defer to the other board members. I'm just sharing these are the additions that I would like to add. If you would like to support that, you can. If you want to wait until January for the next board to review 205 to add those additions, that's fine as well. It's up to you guys.
So Judy, what would be the difference of like,
I'm fine with that.
what would be the difference of number 1? Like that being in there versus something like that?
I'm sorry, what number 1 are you
Well,
talking about?
Underwritten materials.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that being part of the policy in terms of what the expectations are, like how is that any different? Why is number 1, I'm not asking it to be.
No, I know
contrary,
it. Oh, this, a copy of the printed materials included electronic communications. So like we have the table that's always sitting by the door, and all of the materials that we're covering
Yeah.
that night, there's one copy always printed out there for whoever comes to our community
Yeah, I just
meeting.
mean, how is that different than what Brian's saying, you know, in terms of,
What I'm saying is that any artifact that's shared, no matter what, I'm sorry, I think you're, because if it's here, how's it different?
well, I'm
There's no
saying
difference from
number
it.
1 is also technically a practice, right?
Mhm.
Correct.
Well, this is what is, well, and honestly, to that point, this is exactly what you're saying. We just don't do it on our work sessions.
For
I mean, we have the printed materials, and this is saying including electronic communication. So what Brian is asking, this is to have it available for the people that come to our meetings. What Brian is asking for the people that don't come to our meetings, to have it up on the screen, or up available, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think there are instances, I feel like, where we had financial updates and they may not have been printed.
Right.
And so, again, anything that we are seeing or reviewing during a working session, to me feels that they're just supplemental artifacts that are part of the working session
After.
record.
After,
Yeah.
so they could, so
Yeah.
that way they're getting the updated materials.
So maybe
and then they
this one
go
can
back.
just be updated to include,
Yeah.
I like that, Brian, I agree.
I'll have to figure out how to do that, but see, this isn't an open meeting, a copy, that's for here, so we would just have to figure out how to add it for, Yep.
Okay. The next one is on sessions closed by the Bureau of Mediation Services. And so this one says, all negotiations, mediation service sessions, and hearings between the Board of Education and its employees or their respective representatives are public meetings. These mediation sessions, mediation meetings may be closed only by the Commissioner of the Bureau of Mediation Services, BMS. And so I don't know how we share this or don't, or if we don't share this, but because they are public meetings, how do we communicate to the public that these are public and they can attend if they want to? Or do we not? I don't know. So all negotiations, mediation sessions, and hearings between the Board of Education and its employees or respective representatives are public meetings. Do we communicate them or do we
Yeah,
not?
I do think there's a notification we're required to put out for those. I can't recall off the top of my head what that method is, but yes, they are open. I've had, when I was in my previous role, before I was the superintendent here, I was on the negotiation team with Mr. Massaros, and we had to post, and we did have people come
Right.
in and attend
Yeah.
Yep.
those sessions.
Okay.
So
I think my experience from the last one there wasn't a lot of communication, and maybe there was and I neglected to see or didn't see.
I didn't see a whole lot on it.
Yeah.
I mean, especially like where they were and.
I mean, we highlight board meetings all the time, and I'm not saying that these meetings, we need like everyone in the kitchen sink at them, but I just want to make sure that there's transparency around these meetings also are available. And maybe it doesn't belong in here, maybe it's a communication thing, but it is something that,
Right.
I want to make sure it's,
I think it's actually
Available.
statutorily required.
Yeah, it is.
As
Yeah.
part of Minnesota statute. I just can't quote you the statute right now on that, or the method, but I can certainly make sure the whole board knows the answer to that
Okay.
in specificity, and I apologize that I don't know that.
There's a lot of statutes, so it's okay.
Well, yeah, no, I just know we've had different negotiation sessions where there are public present.
Yep.
It's pretty rare, but it has happened.
Anything
all right.
else?
But wait, if there's a statute though, we could find it and maybe state the statute in here?
That's what we should do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, I do have one last one. Well, I think, yeah, one last one. It is seven, under, coaches an opportunity to respond. So, this one says, the Board of Education has, if the Board of Education has declined to renew the coaching contract of a licensed or non-licensed head varsity coach, it must notify the coach within 14 days of that decision. And then, so the first question in that one I have is, I'm trying to understand, because I don't know, the contracts that licensed and non-licensed head varsity coaches receive, but more importantly, why is it just the head coaches and not anyone on the Schedule C that is a lead for any of the activities from, the chess team to the whatever team, I think Schedule C has over 50 different activity leaders or coaches or advisors or whatever you want to call them. And so I'm trying to understand why it calls out just the head varsity coach and no other activity person. And are they not under contract or does that make sense?
It does, I mean,
Do
I
some
get what you're
checking on that
saying.
one.
I get what you're saying,
So I'm
but.
trying to understand if a head varsity coach is viewed differently from a coach for DECA or a coach for debate. And so, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I do know what you mean,
Licensed
because,
and non-licensed, or I guess it says licensed and non-licensed.
yeah, it is licensed and non-licensed.
Yeah.
So with this is actually what's written in statute too.
Are
Yeah,
those
and
under
which is-
contract?
Huh?
Are
Which,
those under contract?
I
so
think,
All of them?
Contract.
the,
Yes.
there's a bunch of them.
It's Schedule C contract.
Yeah.
So it's a Schedule C
So I mean,
contract.
all the debate, all those are under contract.
Yes, in Schedule C.
when we pay him a stipend.
For
Yeah,
high
stipend.
school and even all the way
Yeah.
down to elementary. And so I'm not saying that it has to be just a varsity head coach. I think I'm just getting clarity around if we're gonna give the varsity head coach this thing, then do all the other coaches don't matter? Or do the other coaches like have a different rule? Or if I don't like the debate coach or let me rephrase that. If the debate coach has come to us and we have to make a decision, they don't follow this rule, you know what I mean? So I don't know, maybe we have to look and ask, any representative or any person placed through Schedule C activity pay follows this process?
This, I mean, the only thing I would say
I
is,
would-
this is a good MSBA question because this is specific policy in MSB. Like, that's where it's like, there must be a reason for
No,
it.
this is actually with the state
statute.
statute. I was just gonna look that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again,
So-
state statutes is just at a high level, but at the
Yeah.
local level, do we want it to be, like, I don't know, does the aeronautics team different from the basketball team?
So, just to answer your question, before we go any deeper with this one, let me find out what the rationale is for it being worded the way it is, and really who all that, because does this mean, even though it says head varsity coach, we maybe call our DECA person a advisor, but maybe they're considered coaches by the state or whatever. Let me call and get clarity on what this actually means.
Yeah.
Might check with the ADs too, they might have an idea of why it's that way.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know that they would know by,
Well, they would know if the head coach is treated differently on a different type of contract than an advisor and an assistant coach.
Oh,
They
I
would
see.
know that.
Which
But it
you're
is a good
asking.
point that
Yeah.
this is a route available for
Yeah.
them, but
Yep.
why not others?
Yeah.
that-
I mean, if you're the bowling coach, is that no different from the high school
No, they
coach?
would.
I don't
Bowling
know.
coach.
I mean,
I don't think it comes.
I appreciate the
Should
bowling
be.
coach
It should be.
because they gave us 2
Yes.
bowling students for our bowl-a-thon, so that was
And they
awesome.
were awesome.
Yep.
There you go.
And then I think the last one that I had was letter B within coaches. It says, if the coach requests the reasons for the non-renewal, the Board of Education must give the coach the reasons in writing within 10 days of receiving the request.
Yep.
The paragraph or the sentence that I wasn't sure is, it says, the existence of parent complaints must not be the sole reason for the Board of Education not to renew a coaching contract. And so I don't want to like stir the pot, but it's like you've got sports that are there to support students and parents. It's they're the one funding for their kids to play in these activities or participate in these activities. I don't know if that is a state statute, if that is a best practice from MSBA, or like I haven't done enough coaching to say, hey, can 2 parents complain, or do I need more complaints than just parents? And one of the reasons I share that is because what if parents have, like, do they have a feedback tool to say, hey, my son's experience wasn't good, my daughter's experience wasn't good, so the net promoter score of that coach from its customers, the students, is poor. And so while the record might be, let's say, 10-0, but the culture is terrible because the students don't like it, but their record is good, I don't know. And so do parents have a say, or should they have a say? Yeah, I'm just making.
well, we used to do
They still do.
the parent surveys.
The parent, every sport has a parent survey, a student survey. That goes to the AD. The AD puts together the information,
Yeah.
meets with the coach.
Yeah.
The only thing I think can happen, sometimes that would be a concern if it didn't state that, it's just some of the group think that can happen.
I would agree.
Yep.
And there should be some protection for coaches in those kinds of circumstances, and that's probably why that is.
Well, the sentence says the existence of parent complaints must not be the sole reason for the Board of Education not to renew a coaching contract. And I don't know what the statistical analysis of whatever may be, but there's a reason why parents are complaining. And if there is a majority or a reasonable number of complaints for whatever reason, should that have merit? Or should that
But-
warrant some sort of conversation, and is that enough?
I'm just saying, if I'm the AD, and I'm not the AD, but I'm probably watching for a trend, right? Because the groupthink can happen within one season, that gets really toxic, right? And so if you're the AD, you're probably wanting to look at, is this a trend of complaints?
Yep.
Or is it the severity of the complaint within one season that might do something?
Yep.
But the AD or other people can also voice their concern, which would result in.
So I'm in alignment with that, but when you say there's a trend, and if there's a trend of parental complaints, but if the existence of parental complaints is not the only reason, or is the only reason, then you can't do anything about it.
I think that's
Well, you
illegal.
can,
now.
According to
because-
this document.
Well,
It
It's-
says if
You-
you see a trend of parental
Yeah.
complaints, you can't do anything about it.
Well, but if that's happening, there's probably also other things
But
happening.
I think what I'm thinking about, and maybe this is the caveat to that, when I think of a situation like that, it's going to be the students complaining, not the parents.
Should
No, but I get-
should their opinion be valued? I
but
mean,
what Brian's saying, if we've got a trend with parents complaining year after year, this is saying that the AD or whoever can't do anything about that coach. And I think what Carly is saying, that it would be the responsibility of the AD as whether it's 1 year or one parent or many parents, to understand what the complaint is really about and what the root cause is, and there's more to it than just a parent complaining if they take the time to understand what the complaint is about. It may just be a parent complaining, but if a parent complains, I would think that there's due diligence to understand what that complaint is and what the validity of it is, and that there's reasons behind the complaint. So now it's not the parent complaint, there's now a reason behind the complaint.
There is probably a lot more, and again, I will acknowledge that there probably is a lot more that I don't know about the AD process and the coaching process, but as I read this letter, this policy, it says clearly, the existence of parent complaints must not be.
I think you don't like the restricted part.
Well,
I don't, yeah.
Well, but this was added from, I mean, this might be another.
I know,
thing we need
I
to
wrote
look
it
at
down.
with the
I'm trying to
statute.
search the statute why we do this, but it's too hard to do that
Because
and
this
talk.
was something we
But
added from the,
From MSBA.
this came from the
MSBA.
MSBA, yeah, but,
that's not like. we
but the
added it.
question is, did MSBA add it, or is it actually in statute?
Statute,
And then the
Yeah.
big question is why?
yeah.
My guess is there's a.
Well, if it's
history
in
of
statute,
stuff.
then we don't have a choice, but if
Right.
it's not in statute, then why?
I would guess
Yeah.
there's statute based on a history of something like this,
Yep.
where they're,
Probably.
yeah.
And you are right, there's groupthink, and you got players that, hey, my son didn't play, or my daughter didn't
Mhm.
play, and then you've
Both have
got
that.
a group of 10 that say, and then there's now a trend, but then if there's a trend, you can't do anything about it. And so, but there, and again, this is probably for
Let's
another
do the
meeting.
research on that one,
Okay.
okay?
Yep, sounds like we have some questions on that.
Okay, and I
But
don't have any
Can I
more.
just clarify that, so you're gonna check that statute, but then we could revise this and then
Bring it back.
bring
Sure.
it back, but do we need to bring it back to another work session, or can we bring it?
Yeah, I think we need to
Yeah, we
bring it back to
do,
another work
we do,
session
because I
first.
think we need to bring it back and revise it, but just also check legally to see if this stuff
update it.
will fly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and get some understanding on a couple of these areas.
Have it here.
I'll make sure it gets
I know
out
you do.
to the next work session.
Couldn't find
Okay,
it.
Sharon.
Sorry. All right, so the next topic on our agenda is, I think, the topic of the hour, which is the appointment process. I do have a few clarifying points that I feel like we need to answer tonight with this. One of those will be the questions. We never, as a board, discussed what questions we would ask if we were interviewing a person. So we need to talk about, maybe not necessarily those questions, but the process of how we're going to ask the questions, and then how we're going to come up with the questions. And then also, I feel like, to be fair and clear to whoever we end up interviewing later on or whatever, I think we need to be clear on when we intend to put this appointment, or not the appointment, but actually the election date. Because the person that's being appointed, because of the amount of time left on the term, also has to run again this,
In November.
well, not necessarily in November, but has to run again for the remainder of that term. So there are several
They
dates.
don't have to, though, right?
They don't.
They don't.
They don't, but I mean, like, if the board intends to do it, like, there are several dates that you can hold a special election for,
Yeah.
and I'll read those, and this is why this is important. Second Tuesday in February, second Tuesday in April, second Tuesday in May, second Tuesday in August, and first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So if the board says, hey, we want to run this special election in February, I think any person that's interviewing for the appointment process, they should know that, right? Because then they're going to have to go into, if they're interested in running, like, how long they're going to be appointed, and then when that election were to take place. So
Yeah, that's a
those
good
are just
point.
some questions that I have about this process. The questions, I want to be mindful that there were board members that contacted me and asked if the questions could be confidential. That's also something the board needs to consider. Do we share those questions in advance with the participant, or do we keep those questions confidential until the interview? And then also, I want to be mindful of the fact that if for whatever reason the board votes to not appoint the fourth vote getter that we have, I feel like it would only be fair to keep the questions the same if we go into an appointment process, so that the questions are not geared specifically to one, I mean, because it almost sounds discriminatory when I think about it, like if we use different questions for a different person if they come in. So those are just some questions that I have in my mind, and just based on what you all have reached out to with, so anyway, I'm opening the floor up for discussion on those topics.
Let's start with the first one, the dates is probably the easiest one to get.
Sure.
My thought is, I would rather have the person run when there's a regular election going on rather than us having a special election, because it's very expensive to have a special election for just the school board.
But we have bond referendums, discussions.
I know, but I would pick one of those dates that we're already having something.
But I think she makes a fair
That-
point, we should pick it before the person interviews.
So that
or
they
tests,
know.
they know.
Yes, so
We're
do we
clear.
have some dates that we know that we're
She
gonna?
just-
No,
But I-
so, wait a second. Would she just, those are by law, the dates, the only dates
Right,
that you can run,
right.
especially elections? Anything but a levy referendum. Levy referendums are only in November.
Well, unless it's a capital, which.
Capital.
Well, I mean,
in the spring.
an operating levy, sorry, yes. And so if we are gonna have a discussion about a bond referendum, and those tend to run before November, just because it unfolds better for bidding and building and all that kind of stuff, we'd have to know if the staff is ready to have conversations and if there's even an appetite for us to do that. And I
Well,
think
and
that
I'm-
would be hard to dictate when
Right.
that's going to be.
I get it. I'm just looking at, so
So then you'd want to
Just-
take. then
just
you-
wait, I
then
wanna-
you-
I wanna
then you'd
go over
wanna
the-
take the November one.
I want to go through the timeline here so that we're thinking about what we're doing to an individual here. So we've
Right.
just had an election, and now this person, whoever we choose, is going to be appointed. And then they have to turn around and run again in November, if that's the date we choose. So not even really a year between those terms. And that's through the end of the term then, which would be another year. And then they have to turn around and run again, right? So that's 3 times in a row. So I'm trying to think about how to be most fair to someone who was put in this situation. And also, like, maybe they don't want to run again in November, that's fine. Maybe they are only interested in filling in for a short period of time. I think it's very important that we determine what that date is.
So I don't, why I understand your point of view, I don't think that should matter. These are the dates and these are the facts and these are the black and white. You let that person, let them decide if they want to, let them decide if they want to continue on. The date is the date is the date, and so.
But it's not, because
It's
like,
not, because she just gave you a bunch of.
I just gave you a bunch of dates that could occur,
I am in
right?
alignment
So,
with
I
Terry
mean,
because we're spending extra money
if
that we
I'm
don't
the-
need to.
I'd
If I'm
rather
the
do
person
it-
that's being appointed,
Yep.
and I come into interview, and I find out during the interview that the board intends to have the special election in February, I might say, I'll just wait
Or
and
what
run in
if they decide to
February.
have it during.
Well, what did we
the bonding
communicate?
one?
We didn't communicate, that's why I'm saying this is a process that's not clear.
I think it's hard to determine, because if we were going to do a bond, that would not be in November. So we're talking about November for a special election, but it seems too premature to make a decision if we don't know if we're gonna do a bond. Because then if we're gonna do a bond, we would wanna pair those so that we're not spending extra money.
Right.
Yep.
So I appreciate what you're saying, because I would wanna know too, but I don't think we can make a financial decision like that without more information.
Is it
And I
like
believe Bill-
15,000 to do an election?
65.
60.
60?
And I believe Bill did share in a previous meeting that we will have to do some sort of special election
Right.
for a levy that needs to be renewed.
And that was what,
For
November?
next
Well,
November.
that's November, so then
I
maybe
think
that's
you're
the
right.
safest.
So we will be doing one no matter what at that time.
That's what I just said.
Let's do
Oh, I
November.
didn't hear that, I'm sorry.
Do
Dave, you
November
should've
then.
spoken
I know.
louder.
I'm just-
I agree with that, November.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first one. So then we know that this person, whoever we appoint, will have to run again in November.
So are we saying we're
Could.
not going,
Could.
no,
Could
are we
protect.
saying we're not going to do a bond referendum potentially in the spring?
That's not gonna be our
I don't
decision.
know.
I don't really know.
Is it?
Because
Is that
if
the
we-
decision?
It's not gonna be my decision.
Why not?
Well, I'm not gonna be on the board.
But I would say
Well, wait a
that-
minute, because if we're running a bond referendum in the spring, I think statute requires us to have,
Unless you
this
want to
person
appoint.
has to run, so we can't decide we can't decide on when they get a run again until we have our bond and levy discussion.
So maybe the communication is that at this point in time, that election will occur in November unless the district decides to do a bond, and then it will occur in the
Yeah,
spring.
then it could be any one of those months. So, I mean, those months are all open. And if anybody's interested in this process, I'm sure they're following us and are going to be aware. But those
I don't know
are,
if you can do that.
February
Can you?
seems unlikely.
can do
I
do
don't know why you
what?
couldn't.
I mean, to be able to say, I mean, because they have a certain term, what does the application, what does the resolution form say?
Well,
'Cause-
what is your question? I guess I'm
Well,
confused
I-
on what you're asking.
Because, let me see. If they are going to be here until November, and then we tell them, well, you can only be here until, if we choose to do it a special election sometime in XYZ. Well, I guess
So statute is clear that when there's more than 2 years left on the term, that we have to appoint, we must appoint
Okay.
as soon as possible, right? So there's more than 2 years left on the term until January. So if we're appointing in this time, then this is the process we have to follow. There's an appointment, and then there has to be an election.
And what you said is,
Well,
it'll
then
be in
where-
the spring, it'll be in the fall.
It'll either be in the
And then
spring or the fall.
statute says
Let it
that
go.
they have to then be, an appointment has to be elected at the next
next election.
special election
Yes.
that the district would run.
So,
Correct.
but I believe a special election is voting for voting for the board seat, but can you use special election for a bond referendum?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, any special election that
So it'll only be for
if it's
4
not a
months.
general election
Could
or
be.
mid-year
Could
election,
be.
it's a special election.
Yep. So it would be spring or fall.
So the date is not the easiest one.
No.
You were
Well,
Jeez,
still think it's gonna be the easiest one in my mind.
Can we follow up with MSBA if that is what?
That is from
best
MSBA.
practice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That
It is, that's statute.
Yeah, and I also checked with the attorney on that.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right, date, off.
Okay,
Next.
communication on that is clear. All right, so then the next part that we need to discuss is questions and how the board wants to handle that process for questions first. So do you want the questions to be shared with the individual before the interview, or do you want to keep those questions confidential until the interview?
In the past, we've probably kept them confidential, we did until the interview.
Yep.
I think they were shared like 15 minutes prior or half an
I-
hour prior
yeah.
or something like
Well,
that.
what I don't wanna see is a prepared script, like we did at the forums.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I
So-
want the person to talk to me as a real person.
All right, so questions will be kept confidential.
Yeah.
So I think the concern that I have with that one is that if we're gonna use the same questions for the next round,
No.
then they won't be confidential. And
I
if we're
would-
gonna change questions for the next round of applicants, then you're not making it consistent with the application process.
That was, yeah, that
So-
was
In
one
my
of the
That's my-
mind,
that's my
in my
concern,
mind,
yes.
you
The only-
should
the only
not
point-
keep it confidential, let it out, and if they come prepared in a script, that is that person's decision to come to the table with a script. And now you may not like it, and that's an opinion, but that may give you to say, hey, like, I don't like a person who comes in with a script. So if it's public, it's consistent, and it gives board members a chance to prepare their answers if they want to. What if they want to do research? What if they want to be more thoughtful of the answer that they want to put together? But whatever we give this person, we ought to be using the same for the application process so that it's consistent. And then those people will have those questions
Oh,
ahead of time.
Wait a
So-
second, so we're skipping to another process then?
No.
So the
Well,
process
kind of.
that we've agreed, the process that we've agreed to do is to take the fourth largest vote getter, take that individual and interview them to see if they're a fit for this board and this district.
Right.
Then, if that doesn't move forward, you're now talking about the next process, which is the application interview process. Those questions could be the same, could be different. They need to be the same for all the individuals that we interview for that process, but they don't need to be the same for the individual we interview for this process, because this process is a very specific person, individual, whatever, that we're seeing if it's a fit for the board.
Yeah,
I just don't think that's
but
fair.
that candidate is no different from an applicant candidate, because they've come to the table, right? We probably know more about that person than the other applicants potentially, but they're coming to the table, they just have, like, I don't wanna call it first dibs, but like how is that person any different from an applicant who would go through the interview process? The questions ought to be the same. I mean, why would you be viewing this person differently than the other applicants that come through?
It's a different process.
It's a different process, and I think we're talking about this process tonight.
I don't think, in my opinion, anybody should have access to questions ahead of time, because when have you ever interviewed for a job and gotten
Yeah.
the questions
Yeah.
ahead of time? Like,
Yeah.
this is a job interview. They
Yeah.
should be prepared for whatever. And I think in the second situation, you don't want everybody knowing what happened in the first round that's gonna be repeated. And I don't think it's
So, but how is this
discriminate.
candidate different
just-
from the other ones?
Because they do get first dibs, like you're saying. And we could vote to appoint that person, in which case they didn't have to compete against anybody aside from the election. So I don't think we face any discrimination if we have this process, and potentially we have a second process where we treat all of those candidates the same. These are two different situations.
It's two different situations,
But they're
but
applying
I
for the
want to be
same
very,
job.
very, very mindful that it feels like we're holding someone to a different standard than everyone else.
Yes.
We are.
And because they're being appointed to the exact same role, so why are we giving them different questions?
Well, what if we have the same number of questions, but it's not the same questions?
Well, does it even matter?
It's
Should
the
we- I mean,
same
are we
process.
gonna just appoint the fourth person anyways? Are you gonna be able to vote yes, Terry?
Let's keep it
What are
on
you
topic
talking
here
about?
with what we're talking about, because
Well,
calling out
I'm just asking,
individuals
I
is
mean-
not helpful.
Well, it doesn't matter even, all right, that's fine. What I'm saying is that the person is applying for, the person that we are appointing for the vacancy, right, it's the same position. So why would we interview someone with different questions? And then if we don't like that candidate, ask a different set of questions for different candidates all applying for the exact same position.
Can we decide that?
That's not treating the
Well-
second group the same as the first person. That's where I actually feel like we would face potential discrimination, is the first person could say, the second group of people knew all the questions. That's more discriminatory than saying, okay, here, we can say for each candidate, we're gonna give, each board member gets one, I don't know, as long as we approach the situation in the same way, the questions themselves can be different if we have different pools.
But if you have 5 candidates in the second round, the 5th person is gonna know the questions ahead of time.
So I'm just thinking
Not
about
Not
this
necessarily.
from an HR standpoint, and when we interview someone for a job and it's the same job, it's the same questions every time.
Okay,
Yes.
No, it's not.
It is.
It is, legally it is.
Except
I can't
this
say
is a
like,
totally-
if
When
I
I-
have a job and I'm interviewing this teacher for a special ed job, and I ask one candidate questions 1, 2, 3, 4, and the next person comes in and I only ask
That's
them
when you're
questions 1 and 2.
doing, that's when you're doing, like, when I interviewed for team members, when I was doing my interviews, I did ask them all the same questions. But right now, we're talking about this process. We have one individual we're interviewing. And so the question is, do we want the questions to be confidential for this one interview that we're gonna be doing on the night of the 19th? And I believe we should have them be confidential just because it is, I mean, we've never really had our candidates, giving the candidates the questions ahead of time to be prepared. And I don't think we need to. I'm sure they're comfortable after going through a campaign and stuff. You're pretty comfortable being able to address the questions, so.
Terry?
Yeah, just a couple thoughts. One, we know the fourth person because we saw the forum. You know that person. You could have 5 people you don't absolutely know nothing about that apply for that position if we go to the appointment process.
The application
That's got to be
process.
different questions.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to ask the questions of the fourth candidate that.
So let me ask you, if you were an HR recruiter and you were referred, you knew the candidate that was coming in, and and you ask them questions, are you telling me that the other candidates that you may not know, you're gonna ask them different
No,
questions?
that's a totally different
It's
thing.
a different process
That's
and
a
a
different process
different time.
altogether.
This would be like posting a job.
Yep.
You didn't find your right candidate, and you post it again, and no one says you have to, in post 1 and post 2, follow the same exact
You-
question.
But
Wait,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yes. There is no situation like that where if you go through post 1 and say, nope, it's not our person.
Yep.
Nothing says you have to do it the same.
So in my profession, we have to then validate why the first candidate didn't get the job by
The
using
candidate.
metrics. By looking at the metrics and comparing that to the second pool of candidates. And so my point of view is then keep the questions consistent for whatever process, because it's for the exact same job that everyone's applying for. Because if you have different questions or you have different metrics, how do you compare that your justification of not approving the first person is relevant or is valid? You know, you're
'Cause
giving them two different scenarios.
That
So-
process is over with and you're starting a new process, a new, different process.
So my point of view, then I'll leave it as that, is that I think the questions should not be confidential. They should be forward. How the candidate chooses to respond to them is at that person's discretion. And then all the questions are out there. That's no different from the questions that we have here on this form.
It is
And
though.
because the questions on this form is provided to the candidates ahead of time, and these are the questions that you use, and then what I'm showing is the application form for a vacancy appointment that was used at the last time.
Those aren't the questions for the interview.
But these are the questions that you use to screen candidates, so you made it consistent and fair.
To screen the candidates,
To
and then
screen the
we had
candidates to bring them
another,
in.
then we had another set of questions
Yes.
that was confidential that they did not know about, that we used to interview them for the ones that made it through the application process.
So I
That's a
wanna-
different
Yes,
process. That's not
exactly.
what we're talking about tonight.
So I want to be clear, the reason that I brought this up is because I'm always concerned about the district's legal liability and making sure that we are doing things legal and fair. That's the reason I brought it up. I'm not trying to get into a big argument. I just think it's important to have this discussion to make sure that we are considering those types of scenarios. David is an attorney and he has some thoughts on that process. You do. Can you please share?
Well, I agree with Carly and Brian a little bit, but I think that we should let the question, they shouldn't have the questions, because that's not what a job interview is. Using the same questions, the second group is gonna know what the questions are, and that doesn't seem fair to the first
Gives
person.
them an advantage,
It gives them an
correct?
advantage, so then I think we should, that's not fair to Brett. And so, I think then we would need to come up with some.
Just make it public.
So we're talking about a process that
But I
we
don't
don't
think
even
then
know
you
if we're
would-
gonna have.
Yeah, that's
Correct.
true.
But
I
we
was
also
gonna
have
say,
to consider
can we
it.
just
No, we
delay this
don't.
till
We're
after-
talking about tonight's process, which is how are we gonna handle the interview? And then if we go to the next process, we can have that conversation in light of
But
what
they're
we
kind of
did.
linked, what she's
They are
saying is
kind of linked
they're kind of
because
linked.
that's our second
It's our interview process
contingency
for the
plan.
position.
And I want to make sure that there's no legal liability linked if we use different questions, if we get to that. Like, I just want to be
can't see
clear.
how there's any legal.
There's no
liability.
legal.
This is why
Yeah,
I'm just
I don't
asking
think that- I don't think
questions.
legally,
Everybody's
but
allowed
I
to
just
ask
think
questions.
being fair and it's more of a fairness type of issue.
I appreciate in terms of just thinking this through, but it seems like what you're saying is.
It's been answered.
Yes.
That's.
Okay,
Yep.
are we on to the next one now?
So we're good, everybody's good with
And
confidential?
going back to the
No.
date thing, I was just thinking about the date thing.
Well, I'm looking for
If
majority.
we set the date, in this, at the bond or the spring election, the new board could change it, so it doesn't really matter.
Change what?
What happens?
When the special
Yeah.
election is.
No, they can't. I mean, if we're having a special election in the spring for a bond, we have to, the
You do
person
not
has
have
to
to have
run.
that.
Right, but there's 4 different dates on when we.
Oh,
can
yeah,
set
there's
the
if we
different
do.
dates.
So
Right.
us
Doesn't
setting
really matter.
a specific date doesn't really matter.
It doesn't
Oh,
matter.
no, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Okay, so that aside, are we agreeing majority-wise that the question should be confidential?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes,
No.
no. All right, so the questions are confidential. So then, my thought process around this is each board member should send the chair 2 questions. I will gather them all together. If there's any that are the same, I'll kind of give you those out and let you know if they're different. And then when we have our working session, I will give every board member the copy of the questions.
How many questions should we ask the
I would-
candidate? Because at the last appointment process, I think there was a total of 5.
Okay, I just threw 2 out there. Like I
Okay.
said, this is a discussion.
Yep.
Well, but
Well,
you're saying
so-
2 because in case there's any overlap or
Which
repetition.
there probably,
Correct.
which
So-
there probably will.
Or like 1 question and a
But-
follow-up.
Is there going to be a limit on the number of questions? I think that's fair.
Yes.
Like, are we going to do 5?
No, so I think,
Well,
I
you
mean-
did 5 at the last one. That's just, I'm just
well,
saying.
because we were doing multiple candidates.
candidates.
And there were candidates that you didn't know.
Correct.
Okay.
And so,
And now we
so
know
my
this candidate.
recommendation is that
But
everybody.
now we know this candidate.
My recommendation is that you just, each board member has 2 questions. I mean, there's 6 of us, that's 12 questions. That's going to take some time. But then we'll also, so my recommendation is that we each come to the study session before we do the interviewing, and we bring our questions and we discuss them and what flow we want to go with them. And then, like Brian asks his, and then Carly, and then Terry, and then Dave, and then Kim, and then me. And then we go around that same process, so we make sure that the questions flow the way we want them to flow.
I think that could cause a lot of chaos. I think.
That's what we did the last time.
I know,
It
but
worked really
We
well.
haven't ever done this process before. I think we should do,
true.
I think we
We've done
should
the
send the
interview.
questions.
We haven't done this
I think we
process
should send the
before,
questions to
because it's such a
Kim.
unique
She
process.
vets them out, and then we can have some order.
So we have done the interview process.
Yes, but we
We've-
haven't really done it this way.
Well, we've done the interview process, and so I
But
think.
we really haven't done it this way.
So, and I think that gives us a good opportunity to make sure that we feel that maybe some of them, knowing what each board member wants to draw out from their 2 questions, then can maybe help decide whether or not, some of those questions should be combined. And then are we going to allow for any follow-up questions?
think
I
if we're
don't know, I
doing
just think
12,
12, I think
that's way
12
too
questions
many.
is a lot.
I think 12 questions is a lot. I think
I
we
think
should
12
because you
questions
guys
is a
did
lot.
5 last time, and we should be consistent. I don't think follow-up is
You
necessary.
just want us to do
because
one each then?
I think we should do 1 each.
That's
and
fine.
With no follow-up, because that's what you guys did last time. And then we just vote yes
I
and
don't
call
know.
it a day.
Well, hold on, because one thing that we're talking about is consistency.
Follow-up might help the candidate.
Clarify, like you're trying to,
The-
but if there's
It actually
clarity.
might help them more.
But guys, if we're gonna do this, the same process has to occur with the next applicants. Like, it's for the
No.
exact same position.
No.
It's for the, I mean, are you
Different
telling me
Like
that?
people asked me follow-up questions and I was
already-
part of the
Already
appointment
lost that
process.
battle, never mind.
Well,
I feel like there
I
were
think-
follow-up questions in my interview.
I think there were clarity.
It doesn't
It
matter.
was,
Yeah,
it was
it
more
wasn't,
like clarity.
what we did allow was questions of clarity, not follow-up.
Okay,
I
I
think-
think that's fair.
I think if we're considering 2 potential processes, it makes sense to have the same number of questions and the opportunity for follow-up within those.
It's not
Correct.
follow-up as much as clarity
Clarity,
is what we
sorry,
did.
clarity.
Yep.
Clarity.
So did you do clarity at the last one?
Yeah, they asked me, like, I remember that.
She answered something, and I don't remember what it was, but we did a few, just clarify a little bit more what you mean or something to make sure we understood what they
Yeah,
meant.
it was clarifying an answer rather than
Yeah.
clarifying the question that we gave them.
Yes.
But I think we should set a limit on the number, because like
Just one
12,
each.
So
12 will be here
one
until
question per
February.
person.
So what kind of questions can we ask, and who gets to decide what those questions are?
That's what I'm saying. We should each come to the next board meeting before the actual interview and take time to sit down and understand what each of our questions are and see if they're overlapping or duplicating. And if they are, then we can tweak them to make sure that they're not the same.
I
do
don't
you
have
want-
an issue with that
I
process.
just don't
I
think
guess
it'll
my,
give us enough time.
my only concern is I'm only allotted for a half an hour between like when
Right.
we start and when
Yeah,
the
I
interview
don't
candidate
like- I don't
comes
like
in.
that.
And just going with how we discuss things, I don't know if
I
we'll
don't
have enough
like, I
time.
don't like that.
What do you mean?
I think time is gonna be an
I don't know,
issue.
Yeah.
past experience.
I'm okay sending my questions
I'm okay sending questions to her.
to Kim and have her
If there's two that are
condense them.
similar, or if there's two that are the same, I will let the individual know.
I mean, because you can end up with 5 questions that are exactly the same.
Right,
And you can say,
right.
well, you know, combine it this way and.
Yep.
Or you could have very similar, and you could just combine them into one
And that
question.
way, that way we can give you more questions, I think.
I mean, we should trust her a little bit.
I'm not gonna share, I promise.
So then, what I'm hearing is that every board member has the autonomy to create their own question,
And they have to send it to me.
and then there is no approval other than as long as it's not a duplicate from somebody else.
When would you like those by?
Well, it'd be nice to have them by Friday.
That should be easy. That doesn't give you a whole lot of time.
But you guys, I do think it's important that the questions that each of the board members ask is going to help us. Just because I get one question, I'd like to know kind of what the other board members
can
are to
share
make
that.
sure that we're understanding if it's going to get us to being able to make a decision.
But I
But I
think,
mean,
You know
we'll
what
be
I
You've already
mean?
made your decision. You've
We'll be
already
able to,
committed, right?
we'll be able
To
to
vote
share
the fourth
those.
vote getter?
Off topic.
Brian, why are you bringing that
We'll
up?
be
It's
able to
not-
Well, I
share
just wanna
those
make sure that the
at half
community
an hour
has
before
the
the
information that
candidate
they,
comes in
that
and we
we've
can
been
decide.
shared.
if
I'm
those-
sorry, Brian, I can't hear what you're
Go
saying.
ahead.
We'll be able to share those questions just like you stated, like a half an hour before.
Oh, so that's what we'll be doing then?
Yes, yeah. And if
So
we
you're
wanna
still
tweak
going to
anything-
do that half
Yep,
hour before?
Absolutely.
and I don't
Okay.
think you just share what the questions are. I don't think you need to share the names of them, do you?
No, I'll just let people know if they're duplicates, and then when we have the work session, then we'll do.
Well, we're going to probably want to
Special
read our own question, having our names attached. You can't be afraid to have your name attached to your question.
No, I just think, I just don't want a bunch of chaos to happen, so who's gonna read the questions? Are we each, I think.
You're
Well, the
each
way-
gonna read your own question.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's the way that we
Well,
did
then
it
why
last.
yeah, okay, all right.
Can we just clarify also what happened in our last meeting in terms of the consensus that, or the 5-1 vote that we came to?
Correct.
Yes.
So I did answer emails today, and I did share that process with community members that had reached out. The process that the board decided on with a 5-1 vote was that the board would bring in the fourth vote getter. We would go through an interview process, and then the board would vote on that candidate to determine whether they felt like they were someone that would, as Judy stated, work well with the board and be a good board member.
The only other thing I wanted, well, so
With the
I,
contingency that if the board voted no, and that person did not move forward, then the contingency plan was then it would go through an application process.
okay. And I did want to bring one other thing up, but I can wait till after your.
Go for it, I'm done.
We did receive some emails that I think we should probably at least put this on the table, that really the fourth vote getter in terms of the statute is not really determined. It's a 21 vote difference out of 10,000 some, 81,000 total votes. And statute in this case where someone is elected versus not would be a recount, but we can't do that.
Right.
And so some of our constituents have suggested we interview the fourth and fifth.
Right. I will share what the board had discussed this process before, if the votes were close. That was something we discussed during, I think, October 22nd work session. And basically we said, I remember you and I basically having a back and forth about, I'm getting confused between an election and an appointment process, because we've kind of taken both and combined them. In an election, you're correct, like if there's that many, if the tally count is that close, then there isn't a recount. In this process, it doesn't really, it's not an election, it's an appointment process. So we only agreed on number 4. At this time, I would say that would be changing our process with what the board agreed to, and I think we should stick to the process the board agreed to. But again, I'm just one person. The rest of you can comment on that.
Well, and I listened back just because there were so many things that flew around
I know.
and it wasn't the 1022 meeting, it was the earlier one where we kind of like talked about a lot of the what ifs. Maybe it was the 10th. It
The
wasn't our,
8th.
it was the 8th.
I don't know, I remember sitting over here and saying directly to Judy, like, it's hard to separate an election from an appointment because we've taken this, and so we have to keep the election rules election and the appointment rules appointment, because technically the public didn't vote for 4 people. So
Well,
that's where I'm stuck.
Right. You could wait until the certification, if there is a recount.
There won't be because it's,
Well, it would cost us money, right?
Right.
And I don't,
Actually, it doesn't cost us money.
well, but we can't actually
But
request
this is
that
an
in this
actual
situation.
recount.
The only ones who can request a recount under the circumstances that we currently operate
That's
are
right.
the individuals who
Mhm.
were there, and they have to pay for it, which is not the condition that we are in right now.
I'm just putting this out there as something like,
Right.
is
I
this
appreciate that.
potentially any legal consequence? And Dave, you might know. It's something
It's
people
so
have brought
rare,
up.
I don't think you'd find a case.
So from my understanding, a recount is generally for those that are actually elected.
Well, one
Right,
versus
so
another,
one-
right.
one, two,
yeah.
one, two, and three.
Or the 1 and 2.
The 1, 2, and.
No, the
Mostly
recount
one
would
and
be
two.
between
Well,
3 and,
four.
no,
Three.
the
3 and
recount would
4.
be between 3 and 4.
Well, the purpose.
If
the
3 and
Right.
4
It
were
was in
so
this
close.
situation.
Yeah.
right, but
in
the
this
space
situation.
isn't
Yeah,
between 3 and
it's,
4,
it's not
between 4 and
against
5.
about 2 different people that didn't get elected. It's about one who got elected and one who was very close and didn't get
And
elected.
I think that the fourth vote getter was 1,000 votes away, so I don't think that a recount would be able
That's
to
not
to
a
flip that.
recount. I'm just
So-
saying that
Right.
in this situation, is there, like, people have brought up the statute. It's obviously not the same situation because it's the 4th and the 5th.
That's what we talked about.
But people have proposed that, so I wanted to make sure we're acknowledging, people have emailed about a lot of things, but that was
Right.
something that came up from several people.
Legally, it doesn't hold any weight in this process. Any other comments on that? Thoughts?
No, there's a bunch of emails, and I'll pause here and defer to others to weigh in on any other emails that we received, but if not, then it's up to
And
you.
we're just
now.
interviewing the 4th,
And we're
right?
just
Is that what
interviewing.
we're saying?
Then you guys, I mean,
I
I think the
understand
integrity
their-
of the board is on the line as well,
Yeah,
but
I
go ahead.
understand their position and their thoughts on that. And, initially when I saw how close those 2 went, oh boy, that's gonna be, something for us to discuss as well.
I think Chair Baker
But
actually
I-
shared that on 10-1 about the.
Please don't
Ryan.
interrupt, I'm sorry.
Jeez.
I know, great.
But I think what we have to be true to is, we had a process in place, we agreed to it, then we agreed to change that process, and this is the process we're discussing tonight. And so, I think to protect the integrity of the process that we agreed to discuss tonight, although I respect and get their understanding of where they're at, I think we should not do that. I think it's worth a discussion, though. But I think then after this, the backup to this process we agreed to was the application and interview process, at which time everybody has the opportunity to be able to be a part of that if we get to the backup plan of this process.
Correct.
And I did share, I think there were 2 former board members that said that they would be willing to serve as well, so when we have that discussion.
Well, that's not even part of that's another process we haven't even discussed. So we've been agreeing to different processes, and this is where we're at today with this interviewing of the 4th candidate.
Terry, you haven't commented on it, on what Carly brought to the table. Do you have thoughts?
I think I agree with the majority on that one. I think changing the rules, again, is not the right thing to do.
I understand why they want and why
Yeah,
they're
I
asking.
understand that,
I think it's a
too.
fair ask.
It's kind of like a woulda, coulda,
but-
shoulda thing. I mean,
Right.
it wouldn't have come up if it wasn't that close. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah, which is something we discussed. We're
But I
like,
just want to make sure that everybody's really clear that the first process that we'd agreed to is not the process we're talking about today.
Correct.
So,
Dave,
I expressed what I,
just 4th?
Yep, and just to make sure I'm clear that after the interview, each board member will decide yes or no for the candidate.
Correct. The
Okay.
vote will be taken after the interview. So just to clarify, because this is the last item on the agenda and I want to make sure that I have all the information correct, we will bring in the 4th vote getter next week on Tuesday to do the interview process. That meeting will start at 7 o'clock, but the person will not show up.
And just to be clear, it's the 19th, because that one email said the 18th.
And who is the fourth
Yes.
vote getter? I don't think we shared that.
Brett Nicholson.
Okay.
We've already reached out to him too, but, so that person will come in for the interview. The questions will be kept confidential. Each board member will submit one question in advance to the chair. Those questions will be discussed at 7 o'clock during the working session part of our special session until the person arrives at 7:30, which in case we will interview at that time. After the interview is complete, each board member gets to ask their one question and have a clarifying question. And then the board will vote on that person to determine if they will be appointed. We will also share with Mr. Nicholson that the election for that seat will take place in November, barring any changes that happen in the spring. If the district decides to go into a special election, then again, that election will happen in the spring instead of in November. Does that sound correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, just making sure that we're all clear on that. Other than that, I have no additional items on the agenda for tonight. So then we are adjourned for the night, and thank you and have a wonderful evening.
Great, thank you.